Recently, I have found myself interested in France history, or French history to be correct. France, before it became France, was actually called Gaul. Gaul didn't just comprise of modern day France, it also included parts of Belgium, parts of Western Germany, and East Italy. The reason it was called Gaul is because Gaul is a Celtic word, which meant Gallius. And since the Celtics controlled Gaul before the Romans, it was simply known as Gaul. The reason it ended up becoming France is the Franks, who were a German tribe, ended up taking over France and a lot of areas of Gaul. The name France means land of the Franks. Clovis I was the first French king, which we will get into in part 2. Part 1 is going to be about the Celtics, who are commonly referred to by historians as the Celts for short, and the Romans. 4 centuries, which is roughly 400 years before Rome, France was controlled by the Celtics. Actually, it was Gaul, but you get the point. Gaul comprised of France. As at the strongest power of the Mediterranean, the Celtics were a persistent menace to Greece and Rome. In the 5th century BC, Rome made an alliance with the Greek colony of Massilia for mutual defense. It was Rome's first toehold in Gaul and the beginning of the contest between Romans and Celts for the domination of northern Europe. The Romans began to eye Gaul, while the Celts were expanding southward. The Celts became so large that their population became unmanageably gigantic. So gigantic, in fact, that their ruler appointed 2 enterprising young men as leaders of migrations who were seeking a home elsewhere. Among the migrating tribes were members of the Avervine people of southern Gaul, who would later face Caesar in nearly successful defiance. In 390 BC, a Celtic division crossed the Alps, and for the first time, the Celts met Rome in open conflict. Under the leadership of a warrior named Brennus, the Celts defeated a Roman army about 12 miles from Rome. One of the difficult parts about really early history is that there were not a lot of historical sources. You didn't have scribes. In fact, it wasn't until Julius Caesar ended up taking control of Gaul that they started using writing and they developed a written language. That's why it's so difficult, because the stories that you hear about these Celts are typically accounts from Roman historians or Roman scribes, who, of course, would have their own biases due to these people being viewed as barbarians, being viewed as total savages. They didn't keep their own written records. It's very difficult. It's kind of like if you're in an argument with somebody, you only hear one side of the story. That side of the story is bashing the other person. You never really get a full account. You're going based on what one particular side stated. With the Brennus battle, when he went to Rome and was nearly successful, which would have completely changed the course of history, France wouldn't be called France anymore. It's a myth so much that it has become a legend so much that it has been passed down as a Hollywood film. Brennus then went on to attack Rome, an event surrounded by engaging legend. Eventually, the Romans defeated the Celtic invaders and drove them to the territory between the Alps and Po River, an area that became known as Salipe, Gaul. For about 40 years, they were fractious neighbors. In the Celtic manner, some of their disputes with the Romans were decided by single combat between champions. The Celts finally opted for peace, and just like the other areas in Rome, the Celts were accepted by their tolerant masters. The unassimilated Celts of Gaul were a different matter. We'll get into that in a second. But first, a little bit about Rome, a tidbit about Rome, and then we'll get into the origins of the Celts people. The reason that Rome, among many other reasons, this is just one of the reasons, I'm not here to talk about Rome in particular, but if you want to talk about early European history, you're going to talk about Rome. Rome, when they took over an area, whether it was Israel, Egypt, Gaul, Britain, which they called Britannica at the time, when they took over that area, as long as you surrendered, you capitulated in battle, sometimes you didn't even have to battle, you just admitted that Rome was the ruler, you accepted their currency, the Roman dinar, you accepted that the emperor at the time, the current occupant of the throne, was your emperor, you agreed to pay taxes, you were pretty much left alone. You were able to trade and commerce as you were. Your family was able to stay together as they were. You were able to speak your own language. You were able to worship your own God. That's par for the course. And that's why Rome was able to last for so many years. They were very tolerant, not because they were benevolent or nice. They were pragmatic. They knew that the areas that they ruled, if they were to make them angry, if they were to overstep their boundaries, those areas would revolt. If an area revolts, you lose that area. Another area sees that like a domino. They think to themselves, well, that area, let's say for instance Israel, rebelled. They got away from Rome. Let's do the same thing. They thought that cooperation was a lot more pragmatic than domination. This doesn't really surprise me based on my historical account of Rome. Let's get into the origins of the people. The Celts were a bunch of the Indo-European family, from which most of the present-day European, Middle Eastern, and Indian races are descended. Probably originating in the plains of Western Russia, the ancestors of the Celts settled in the Alpine region of Austria and Switzerland. There, between 1300 and 600 BC, they built a coherent society. But at no point in their history were the Celts a separate, blood-pure race. They were a blend of many peoples, a blend of adventurers, traders, farmers, and fighters, bonded by intermediate similarity of religion, custom, and language, which helped them develop a valid sense of identity. In short, they were a nationality. Their development was strengthened by the onset of the Iron Age, which reached the Celtics around 900 BC. The new technology in the hands of a driving and talented people, as well as their growing sense of nationality, gave the Celts an urge for expansion beyond their borders. Beginning about 500 BC, the rest of Europe became increasingly familiar with the Celts. who mounted a wild, unnerving fury in battle. By the 3rd century BC, the Celts were Europe's dominant power, their sway extending south to Italy, east to Romania, Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, Thrace, Macedonia, and north through France and southern and central Germany into the British Isles. This period of the Celts' ascendancy is known as the Latin era, from the site in western Switzerland where the first artifacts were identified. The Romans considered the Celts oafish and unkempt barbarians, unable or unwilling to speak a civilized language or write any language at all. Since nothing was written down, not much is known of the Celtic beliefs, day-to-day interactions, and societal structure. That's a little bit of the origins of the Celts. A big reason that they were defeated by the Romans, they didn't really have an organized society like the Romans did. They viewed themselves more, I guess you could say, as individualists than a collective group. Many of these regions were separate. They would kind of do their own thing. Only the southern part of Gaul really seemed willing to fight. The rest of the region sort of capitulated to Roman rule. In the 2nd century BC, Rome's interest in Gaul accelerated. Rome needed to round out her empire and secure her borders. Gaul was one of the uneasy sectors. Besides, it had rich pastures, deep forests, and great navigable rivers. On their side, the Celts saw Imperial Rome as a threat to their supremacy in northern Europe. The two powers clashed several times on their common border, before the uncohesive Celtic structure finally shattered under the impact of the Roman military and administrative machines. In 150 BC, the Arverni gathered other Celt tribes into a temporary union. See, they weren't even organized. It was kind of like the 13 colonies before the American Revolution. Each territory, each region was different. They temporarily joined forces in order to defeat Rome and challenge the Romans, settled in Mediterranean Gaul. The Celts were defeated by the Romans in 1283 BC. Rome established a military post at the southern edge of Arvernian territory. In 121 BC, the Celts made another attempt against Rome, again led by Arvernian. This time, they were vanquished by Emperor Domitius with the assistance of African elephants. The emperor then annexed a slice of southern Gaul from the Rhone Valley to Geneva, as well as territory in other regions, like the Mediterranean coastline between Rhone and the Pyrenees. After parading around his conquered territories, Domitius brought his spoils to Rome, marched in a victory parade, and paraded around the captured Arvernian chief. Domitius's victory over the Arvernian marked the beginning of the Roman province of Gaul. In 118 BC, this conquest was consolidated by the foundation of Narbo Martius, Rome's first citizen colony in Celtic Gaul, with the primary objective of establishing land communication between Italy and their Spanish colonies. 60 years later, Julius Caesar continued where Domitius left off, until Celtic Gaul was completely absorbed into the Roman Empire. In general, Caesar treated the conquered with leniency, respecting their political and religious institutions, while he saw to gradual Romanization. He put into office men favorable to Rome, admitted Celts of high rank into Roman citizenship, and established the Roman monetary system. A lot of these people, when they were ruled by Rome, continued on with their lives. The only difference was that they had a new currency, Latin was introduced as their language, and writing was introduced to these areas. These areas would cooperate a lot with Rome. They would actually ally with Rome to fight other tribes like the Visigoths. Rome